Okay, good evening, everyone. We are on Dalid Amud Beis. That is 4B. Gloria, I know you're very excited. Your art scroll finally arrived, so you're set to go. We're starting. Again, I'd have to guess if it's to the first power or the second power. I'm just gonna mute everyone now to get rid of any background noise. But obviously, if you have any questions, I'm enabling you to unmute yourself. So you can use that function judiciously. Okay, Dalid Amud Beis 4B. We're starting with the words. It's at the 2 dots. Ketzad Chalios B'Shem B'Shabbos. It's about a quarter way down. Again, I'm assuming it's in the first or second section in Art Scroll. If I had to guess. So you're looking for the words. It's a quotation from the Mishnah. Ketzad Chalios B'Shem B'Shabbos. Does anyone else need help with locating it? Okay. Very good. So here we go. This is just a very small technical question about the Mishnah. The Mishnah basically starts off talking about days in terms of where they are in the month, the 14th, the 15th day, and then the Mishnah starts going in order of days of the week. It talks about Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. So the question is as follows. Ketzad Chalios B'Sheni B'Shab. Well, it starts on Monday here. It quotes it from Monday. Kfar Vayros Gdos Korbo Bayom. So Maishna Reisha Denakat Sidura Diyarcha, Umaishna Seva Denakat Sidura Diyomi. Why is it that the Seifa of the Mishnah, the continuation, no longer goes in order of days of the month, but switches to days of the week? The reason is very practical. Aidi Dimithavchile Nakat Sidura de Yome, because it doesn't go in order. Remember how we're talking about Bimakdim and Liyom Haknisa. There's some days that the villages will go back and forth. So basically, if we went in order of, well, what days do they read on the 11th? What day do villages read on the 12th? What day do they read on the 13th? You'll start confusing days of the week because there'll be so much jumping around. So you know what? We'll keep it easier. We'll just go from day to day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that's just a much easier, more intuitive way for the Mishnah to organize itself. So that was just a brief housekeeping question. Now we're going to get into our featured presentation. The meat and potatoes. Well, let me just whet your appetite for what we're going to see today. What we're going to spend a little bit of time on is the following case. When the 14th falls out on Friday, then we'll briefly talk about, well, not briefly actually, then we'll talk about the halachos of when the 14th falls out on Shabbos. That's what we're talking about today. Now, this will be the Gemara where we learn, this is where the source is, that we do not read Megillah on Shabbos, the reasoning why we don't read Megillah on Shabbos. And it's going to be very interesting. And we're going to learn, God willing, a Gra who distinguishes between Mikra Megillah, why Megillah is not read on Shabbos, yet we do Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos, read the Torah on Shabbos. So, if one should be permissible, why not the other? So we'll get into that tonight. So here, so just to remind ourselves, because a lot could happen over the course of a week, just to remember very foundational points to understand this Gemara. Most places read on the 14th. Whether you're a small village or a huge metropolis, you read on the 14th of Adar. That's when you have Purim. The exception to the rule are Mukafos, are the walled cities from the times of Yehoshua or Achashverosh. Those read on the 15th. And we talk about in the Mishnah that there are going to be times where villages, for instance, will always be moved to either Monday or Thursday. And we discussed why they have that accommodation last week. So I just want to make sure that's clear. 14th is the standard, and then 15th for Mukafos. And by the way, you just need to write down these terms in case you won't remember them. If you need to memorize these terms. Number one, Kfarim are villages. Kfarim are villages. Ayaros are the big cities, general cities. And Mukafos are the walled cities. Okay, any questions? Because I will be referring to these terms. I'll try to translate, but inevitably, I'm going to say them so many times I won't be able to. Let me just, all right. Kfarim, villages, Ayaros, cities, Mukafos, walled cities. Okay, those are our key terms for today. Here we go. Ketzad Chalios, sorry, that was the last one. Chalios Erev Shabbos. So what do we do when it comes out on Erev Shabbos? So if you're able to briefly glance back at the Mishnah, what is our Mishnah actually addresses this already? If you look, it's in the middle of the Mishnah. Chalios Erev Shabbos, if the 14th falls out on Friday, Kfarim Akdim Yom HaKnisa, villages, like they always do, move back to Thursday or Monday. Thursday's closer, they move back to Thursday. The Ayaros will read on Friday. That's the 14th after all. But the interesting novelty here is that the Mukafos, which should really be reading on the 15th, but since the 15th is Shabbos, they get moved to the 14th and read just like any other city. That's what our Mishnah tells us. So the Gemara asks, Masnisan money. Who is the author, not necessarily author, but whose opinion is our Mishnah following? Rebbe Yossi. It could either be Rebbe or Rebbe Yossi. They both have the same position on the matter as our Mishnah that we just read. So my Rebbe, where do we see that Rebbe concurs with our Mishnah? Possibly his opinion is the origin for it. The Tanya, based on this Brisa. So the Brisa talks about a same case, Chalios Erev Shabbos, the 14th falls out on Erev Shabbos. So there's going to be two opinions in here. Opinion number one is not our Mishnah. Opinion number two is Rebbe, who is an opinion that concurs with our Mishnah. So the first opinion is as follows. The Tana Kama says, Kfarim v'ayaros gedolos, makdimin liyom haknisa, villages and cities, unlike our Mishnah, and the cities will move up to Thursday, the 13th. Mukafin choma, and the Mukafos korim bo bayom. They will read, the Mukafin, they will read on, sorry, I just lost the place. Korim they will read on the 14th. They will read on Friday. So everyone shifts one day back. Rebbe Omer Ani. Lo no, there's no reason to move the big cities from where they are. They belong on the 14th. Leave them on the 14th where they belong. Rather, what do? The only thing that we do differently is that we just shift, we shift the villages to Thursday, and we shift the Mukafos Choma, we take Mukafin, and we put them on Yudalid on Friday as well, along with the big cities. Great, but what is the reason for their machlokus? What is their underlying difference? So just to summarize, the first opinion says that villages and cities read on Thursday, which is the 13th, and Mukafin, the walled cities, they read on Friday the 14th. Whereas Rebbe, who is the opinion of our Mishnah, says only villages will get pushed to Thursday. Ayaros remain where they are on the 14th, and Mukafin get pushed from the 15th back to the 14th along with Ayaros. Okay. Oh, Toby, you're muted. I see your mouth moving.
I'm sorry, and I should probably know this already, but why can't the villages stay on the 14th?
The reason is because we always push them.
Pro readers.
Right, so they have to go to the big cities. We don't want to make it hard for them to travel more than necessary. So basically, at the end of last week, we said, is this for the villagers' benefit or for the city's benefit? And we conclude it's for the villagers' benefit. If they normally go to the city on Mondays and Thursdays to hear Torah reading, to get their cases adjudicated by Beis Din, we don't make them schlep an additional time in to hear Megillah reading. When they come in, they can hear Megillah reading then. So I appreciate you making sure that we reviewed that point, because it's good to know the rationale behind this. I actually have a small, I'm trying to think how to share this, and that you can, I'll just share on the screen. In the margins of my Gemara, where is it? You can see I actually made a little bit of a table, a little bit of a chart. It's in Hebrew. I'm not sure how to share it with you guys at this moment, but if anyone wants to look at it and review it afterwards, I'm happy to say. Maybe does Art Scroll have a chart? I feel like Art Scroll should have put a chart in the footnotes. They didn't do that. They didn't put a table in there. Okay, if anyone wants, you can email me after to share. I could share it with you then because visually it's easier to understand. But here we go. All right, there's going to be 3 opinions overall. We just did 2 out of 3. Now we want to know is, this sounds a little arbitrary. Like, okay, I put the mukaf in here, I put that yaros there. What's the I want to know what's the conceptual underpinning of their disagreement. That I want to get to the meat and potatoes here. So my time of the Tanakama. What's the reasoning of the Tanakama? Dichsiv, because it says in the pasuk, b'chol shana v'shana, every year will be the same. Ma kol shana v'shana ayaros komos lemukafin, just as every ordinary year, the regular cities precede the walled cities. Afkan ayaros komos lemukafin. So too, on this year, cities precede mukafin as well. So that's the Tanakama's rationale. Why doesn't he leave the ayaros on the 14th? There's no reason to move them. Well, he's concerned mostly about the sequence. The way the sequencing works is that the regular cities should always precede the walled cities. And since the walled cities can't be on Shabbos, they move up to the 14th on Friday. Perforce, the regular cities need to move up to the 13th on Thursday to retain the sequence. That's what he puts a premium on. The Gemara asks, maybe the words b'chol shana v'shana the pasuk are coming to teach me not to keep the sequence of the ayaros preceding the mukafos choma, but rather it's to teach us that just in any ordinary year, we don't move the cities from their date. We always leave them on Yudalit if we can. You shouldn't be moving them unnecessarily. So he says, Ein Achinami, I agree, but Shani Hagatul Efshar. Here, where both of these values, sequencing and leaving the cities on the 14th, are in conflict with each other, the value of sequencing the Ayaros before the Mukafos Choma, before the walled cities, takes priority over leaving the Ayaros on the original 14th date. That's the Tanakama's rationale for why he moves everything back one step. However, what's the rationale of Rebbe, which is the rationale of our Mishnah? The Rebbe, my time of Chol Shana V'Shana, what's he do with the pasuk Chol Shana V'Shana? So our counter suggestion to the Tanakama is what Rebbe holds. And we're just going to challenge Rebbe with what the Tanakama holds. Rebbe says, why are we moving the Ayaros to Thursday to precede the walled cities, which we push back to Friday? Because we don't move the Ayaros unless we need to move them. And they're perfectly good just where they are on the intended date of the 14th on Friday. But maybe sequencing is more important. Don't you value sequencing? I do value sequencing the non-walled cities before the walled cities, but Shani Hachadul Efshar, here, since they're in conflict with each other, unlike the Tanakama, who values sequencing over keeping the Ayaros on the 14th, I value keeping Ayaros on the 14th whenever possible, more so than making sure that they precede the walled cities. That is the Shita of Rebbe, which is the Shita of our Mishnah. Let me pause for a moment. Can I clarify anything at this point? I hope it's not going to. This is a Gemara that I had to sit down and make a chart for. So I don't blame you if you're like thinking through how to sequence things as we go through it. I'll do a summary at the end, by the way, just so don't despair. Toby.
Rabbi, could you just what is the source for saying that it has to be before the wall, that the regular cities have to go before the wall?
So the source, yeah. So we did, on Beis and Beis, we went through all the sources that told us that in general, the date of Purim is Yud Daled, and the walled cities are on Tes Vav. We base it on Shushan. Shushan, we already know it makes sense. So we use based on the pasuk, we learned that. Now the question is, how much do we value keeping that sequence of walled cities always coming after the non-walled cities? But the shock of the Torah we went through on Beis and Beis, we went through Psukim in Megillah Esther, which proved this point. Where was it? It says the 14th explicitly in the Megillah. This is Esther Perek Tes, Pasuk Yud Tes. It says Alkin HaYehudim HaPrazim HaYoshim Ba'arei HaPrazos. Remember, Prazos are the non-walled cities. Osim Eis Yom Arba Asar Lechodesh Adar Simcha Mishav Yontav V'Shalach Mas Ishraehu. Explicitly says non-walled cities are on the 14th. Then the Gemara inferred, well, what's on the 15th then? 15th is for the walled cities mimicking Shushan.
But so it's an inference. In other words, there's not a specific place that says they always have to be in that order. It's just what we infer from the fact that
we infer that from B'chol Shana V'Shana that there should be uniformity between from year to year. So the question is, when we say uniformity, what are we emphasizing? Is it uniformity that the Ayaros must always be on the 14th, or is it uniformity that the Ayaros must always precede the Mukafos Choma, the walled cities? And usually there's no conflict, except when the 14th is on Erev Shabbos, Mukavos have to be moved up earlier. And the question is, do we move the Ayaros a day earlier to Thursday, or we leave it where it is? So I appreciate, Toby. That was, I feel more clear after explaining that now. So I hope you guys do as well.
Thank you.
Okay. The good news is, by the way, we're gonna learn a third and final approach to what we do in a scenario when the 14th falls out on Erev Shabbos. But the good news is that Rav Yossi's opinion, who we're going to quote here, Rav Yossi concurs with Rebbe, i.e., he's the same opinion as the Mishnah. So even though we're about to quote another machlokus, one of the opinions we literally just learned. So this should be a little easier. My Rav Yossi, where do we see the position of Rav Yossi that concurs with our Mishnah? The Tanya, based on this brisa, same question. Chalios Be'erev Shabbos. It falls out on Friday. The 14th is on Friday. So here's our third and final shita. The Tanakama here in this different brisa says, Mukafin ukfarim magdim liyom haknisa. What an unlikely team. He holds the villages and the walled cities will lane on the 13th, i.e. on Thursday. Vayeros Gedolos Korbo Bayom, and the regular cities still read on the 14th on Friday. Whereas Rav Yossi Omer, Mukafin Komen Yaros, Mukafin do not go before the Yaros, before the cities. Ela Elu ve'elu Korbo Bayom. Rather, the cities and the walled cities and non-walled cities will both read on Friday, the 14th. That's a horror movie. Friday the 14th. So let's understand their rationales, because again, these aren't just arbitrary decisions. My time at the Tanakama, what's the rationale behind the Tanakama's position? Dichsiv, bechol shana v'shana, there needs to be uniformity from one year to the next. Ma kol shana v'shana yaros barbasar, uzmano shel zeh, lo uzmano shel zeh. Afkan ayaros barba asar uzman shel lo uzmano shel zeh. Just as every year, ayaros are always on the 14th, and ayaros do not share the same date as the mukafos choma, as the walled cities. So too, on our year as well, the ayaros need to remain on the 14th, but the mukafos cannot share the same date as the non-walled cities. So what do? Well, the walled cities, let's go through it. The walled cities, they can't go on Sunday because Sunday is already after the 15th. You're not allowed to push past the 15th. It can't be on Shabbos because we'll see soon at the end of this Gemara, you cannot lay Megillah on Shabbos. It can't be on Friday because Friday is the 14th of Adar, and it's not allowed to share the same date as the regular cities. So our only final option is to put it on the 13th on Thursday. And that's how it winds up with the villages. So it's not so much about sequencing for this third opinion. It's not about that the Ayaros must always precede the Mukafos Choma, but it's that they must not share the same date. So the Mukafos Choma can actually come before the non-walled cities. But wait, maybe sequencing should be important. Shouldn't the walled cities always come after the non-walled cities? So Shani Hachatol Afshar, yeah, we try to do that, but this is an extraordinary circumstance. This is a year where we have no other choice. Can't be Sunday, can't be Shabbos, and it can't be Friday because it can't share the same date as the walled city, as the non-walled cities. So therefore, it winds up on Thursday, ironically, with the villages. Both extremes wind up earlier on the same date. Now, this next part's easy because it's what we learned already. Now we're explaining the rationale of Rabbi Yossi, which is the rationale of Rebbe, which is the rationale of our Mishnah. So we literally just did this before. My time to Yossi b'chol shana v'shana, ma kol shana v'shana emu kavan kom yaros, afkan emu kavan kom yaros. Just as every year, the mukafin cannot precede the ayaros, so to here, the mukafin do not precede the ayaros. So they wind up on the same date. Ve'ema b'chol shana. Sorry, that is. Right, so the mukafin cannot come before the ayaros. So we can't put the mukafin on Thursday. And therefore, they wind up on Friday because they can't be on Shabbos either. But wait, I thought we try to make sure that the non-walled cities and walled cities don't fall out on the same date. Answer is Shani Hachadil Efshar. Yeah, Einachinami. We try to make sure they don't fall on the same date, but this is an extraordinary circumstance, and so both categories of cities wind up on Friday. That's what we wind up with. So let me give you just a summary of the positions, and if you want to jot this down, you can. Position number one. Ready? I'm going to give this like the spark notes of everything we just said. So you got your pen and paper if you need to. Spark Notes edition. Here we go. When the 14th of Adar falls out on Friday, there are three proposed ways to arrange the days. Opinion number one is that villages and regular cities, non-walled cities, will lane on Thursday, the 13th, and the mukafin, the walled ones, will be moved a day forward to Yom Shishi, to Friday. Why does he have this arrangement? Because he values sequencing above all else. The walled cities must always come after the non-walled cities. That's how you wind up with that setup. Shita number two, the second position, which is Rebbe Rav Yossi, and that's our Mishnah, is that only the villages move up to the 13th on Thursday, because villages always go to Yom Kinisa. They always go to Monday or Thursday. And Ayaros and Mukafin, regular cities and walled cities, lane on Friday. What's the reasoning? The reasoning is because we keep the regular cities on the 14th always if we can. And the Mukafin are on the same day as them. All right, too bad. We don't care that much for it. So much as keeping Ayaros on the 14th. And the third and final shita is in the second brisa is that villages and walled cities wind up on Thursday, the 13th, and only Ayaros are put on the 14th. Why do walled cities wind up on the 13th? Because they can't be on Shabbos. It can't be on Friday because it's not allowed to share the same date as the regular cities. And so we push it all the way back to Thursday. Those are the three positions. That's what they hold, and those are their rationales. Let me take a moment and pause. Can I clarify anything at this
I have
point?
a question.
Yes, Zaidi.
On the shita that we follow, why can't the villages lane on the 14th?
Because
And I know they normally come in on Thursdays, but if they're going to lane on Thursdays, then they have the ability to lane at home on the 14th. They don't have to go to the city to do it.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, as I understand it, the shita that we follow, the villages go to the city on the 14th. No, was it on Thursday?
Thursday, the 13th.
On Thursday, okay. If they're going to the city on Thursday, regular cities, then they're going to hear the laning on Thursday because they're there anyway. Why aren't the regular cities also laning on Thursday?
So the reasoning is because the prescribed date in the Megillah is the 14th, and there's really no reason for the cities to lane any earlier. The villages have a dispensation, but it's not ideal. The ideal is to lane on the 14th, which is Friday in this case. So that's why.
But if the villages are going to be laning in the cities on Thursday,
yeah,
they have the ability to lane at home on the 14th, which is the day that the miracle actually occurred, and it's the preferred date.
Oh, you're saying can villagers elect to wait till the 14th?
Yeah, it seemed to me.
I think they could.
On the 14th.
Yeah, I think villagers could elect to do that. I mean, the whole reason for the takana is if you don't is part of it is like if you don't have a Baal Koreh, if you don't have someone who could read in these villages, it's like it's like what we're saying. You could have a huge city, but how many people A will be there at Minyan, and B, out of those people, how many of them know how to lane? So in a small village, chances are you're not going to have someone who knows how to lane. But we talked about villages that don't frequent the cities on Mondays and Thursdays. They just read on the 14th. They don't get to be mocked in the Yom HaKnisa and move back to the Monday or Thursday prior. So if they have someone who could lane on the 14th, then they could do that, I believe.
Okay, so then the villages are going to be laning, the ones that can't lane at home are going to be laning in the big city on Thursday. And who's going to be laning for them if they can't lane at home? It's going to be somebody from the big city. So why aren't they laning together?
So that's a general question, basically on our Mishnah. And it's a machlokis actually, whether the person who lanes Megillah for them from the big city on that day, is he like considered chayiv at that point? Does he fulfill his own mitzvah of laning when he lanes for them? So that's actually a machlokis, because we learned you have to be chayiv in a mitzvah to be motzi somebody in that mitzvah. That was the whole debate about can women be motzi men in Megillah reading? Well, the question is the nature of their chiyuv the same as the nature of men? And that's a shir we have coming up, not between Mincha and Maariv this Shabbos, but probably in 2 or 3 Shabbosim, which means there'll be a Monday night class in 2 or 3 weeks as well, once we're done with the Amalek topic. Okay, let's go forward. We're at 7:30. Let's cover ground. This will go a little faster. Here we go. V'savar Rebbe ayaros lo dachina leyom haknisa. Does Rebbe, meaning the opinion of our Mishnah, really hold that cities are never pushed back to the Yom HaKnisa? They're never pushed back to the Thursday or Monday prior? But Tanya, it would seem that we have a contradiction from a brisa. Chalios b'Shabbos, let's say the 14th doesn't fall on Friday, but falls out on Shabbos. Kvarim makdim liyom haknisa, villages are pushed back to Thursday. Vayaros gedolos korim be'erev Shabbos, and Ayaros gedolos read on Friday. Mukavas choma, and the walled cities read lemachar on the next day, on Sunday. Rebbe Omer, Rebbe argues. What's Rebbe Nazi say? Omer ani. Since once we already start pushing off, once we move cities from the 14th it can't be on Shabbos anymore, then we may as well push them back to the Yom HaKnisa at that point. Hagi Hashta. So that's the question. Rebbe seems to contradict himself. Rebbe was a stalwart position. We never move the Ayaros from the 14th. I have a case right here where 14th falls on Shabbos, and you don't lane in an Ayaros on the 14th on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? That's not a good question. It's not a contradiction. Hagi Hashta. Hasam Zman Shabbos. Here, yes, because the 14th, you can't lane on Shabbos, as we'll discuss very soon. But when you can lane, like on Friday, we're not going to move the cities. But it's kind of like you hear this principle in Avelis and laws of mourning. Once something moves from its place, you know, it's like, it reminds me of, this isn't the same thing per se, but it reminds me in halacha. There's something called muksa machmas guf, klisha malachtul iser. A category of muksa is like this pencil. This pencil is called a klisha malachtul iser, which means the reason I'm not allowed to move it on Shabbos is because its function is to do something that is forbidden. Ksiva, writing is forbidden. One of the 39 malachos. Check it out. So, however, let's say this pen is on my bed, and you know, I guess in theory I could try to shake it off, but if it's not coming off, or my phone is there, whatever it is, I can pick up my pencil. I'm allowed to move it litzorich mekomo. This category of muksa can be moved if it's in your way. So the rule is, once I pick it up, I don't need to drop it immediately upon getting it off my bed, but then I could walk to my dining room or my desk and put it in the pen holder there. So how this analogy, it's like once you have the dispensation, once you have the permission to move something, you don't specifically need to put it in the next location immediately. I don't need to drop the pencil immediately once I get away from the bed. I'm allowed to move it a few more steps and put it in a proper place to keep it for the rest of Shabbos. So similar kind of svara here I thought of. It's analogous in the sense that once we cannot lane for the Ayaros on Yudal on Shabbos, we don't need to put it on Friday per se, but you can move it back to Yom HaKnisa on Thursday. So that's the svara over here. The Muksa Machmas Sarun Kiss was an analogy that I literally thought on the spot. It doesn't say it anywhere that I've seen, so take it or leave it. If you don't find it compelling, it's my fault. Okay, next Gemara. Keman Ozla Hadamar Chelbo Amar Rabbi Huna. So who does this opinion of Rabbi Chelbo the name of Huna concur with? Purim Shechalios b'Shabbos called Nidchin Yom HaKnisa. When Purim falls out on Shabbos, everyone, villages, cities, walled cities, everything goes back to Thursday. So the Gemara says, Hakol Nidchin Salgadaitach Va'ikamu Kapin Ta'avdi L'Machar. What do you mean? Why would everything move back to Thursday? Mukafin, the 15th is on, if the 14th is on Shabbos, the 15th is on Sunday. Let the walled cities read on Sunday. What do you have against them? We misunderstood him. Rather it means anything once it's moved gets moved back to Thursday. And who's this in accordance with? Kaman Kerebi. This is in accordance with Rebbe, literally the opinion we just saw. Nothing new learned here. Okay, good. Now we're up to the final section. I'm very excited. Everything that we did until now, there's conceptual things. It's good. It's Torah. But I'm very excited for this next piece, the last piece of Gemara, because this is a very fundamental halacha that doesn't only apply to Mikra Megillah and Purim, but it's an important halacha, as we'll see, for many holidays, and I'll connect it to Shabbos as well. This is, obviously, I encourage you to remember everything we walk away with if possible, but if there's something you do walk away remembering, it should certainly be this next Gemara. We've had a lot of machlokas just now, but there's one halacha that everybody could get behind, which is we never lane Megillah on Shabbos, period. We never lane Megillah on Shabbos. And I mean, our previous discussion was predicated on that assumption about moving readings when it falls out on Shabbos. My time, we've been talking about this for so long. Why don't we read Megillah on Shabbos? We read a lot of things on Shabbos. Amar Rabba, this is Rabba's principle, and we referenced this earlier. Hakol chayavim b'kriyas Megillah. Everyone is obligated in Kriyas Megillah, but as we all know, vein hakol b'kiyah b'mikra Megillah. Not everyone knows how to lane Megillah. So therefore, Gezeira Shema Yitlena Beyado, V'yelech Eitzel Baki Lomod, V'yavirena Arba Amos B'Shusarabim. What are we afraid is going to happen? For those who are following along in daily Mishnah and Shabbos, we talked about this at the beginning when we started the Masechta, where there's an Isser called Hotzah of carrying on Shabbos 4 Amos in Rosh Hashanah in a public domain. What are we afraid is going to happen? You are going to have a few questions about pronouncing some words. So you're going to take your Megillah, you're going to walk over, to Mark Waxwell's house or Nat Sandberg, and you're going to ask them to teach you how to lane. Do we have any Megillah laners on here? Anyone I should be acknowledging? I always get scared every time I like give someone a shout out. I'm like, I probably missed somebody else. It's always dangerous. You go over, so we're afraid the Stanford Eruv might be down, or rather you're in Mamish and Rosh Hashanah, a real public domain that can't be rectified with an Eruv, and you're going to carry on Shabbos when doing this. Therefore, to avoid the Isser of violating Shabbos, we say just don't read Megillah on Shabbos at all. And we talked about this previously, that the rabbis have a right to tell us not to fulfill a mitzvah, the Sheva Val Taisa, in a passive manner in order to avoid violating an Isser in the Torah. And by the way, this isn't just a law for Hilchos Megillah. Behind Taima de Shofar, behind Taima de Lulav. This is the same rationale why we don't blow shofar when Rosh Hashanah coincides with Shabbos. This past year, if I recall correctly, one of the days of Rosh Hashanah was on Shabbos. It coincided. And I think so. Yeah. Is my memory serving? It's been so, Toby's nodding. Okay. And therefore, we didn't blow shofar on that day. Behind the time we do lulav. And by the way, same reason we don't do lulav on Shabbos. I still can feel the embarrassment. When I was a kid, I realized I was late to shul on Shabbos of Sukkot. And I run out the door with my lulav and esrog and everything. I start running to shul. I'm like, and I see nobody else going to shul with their lulav and esrog. I'm like, that's funny. Everyone must have left their lulav and esrog at shul. And I was like, and then all of a sudden, like the blood drain started. So I'm like, oh no, it's muksa. What do I do? So I still remember, and like people are looking at it. I see walking with lulav and Megillah, lulav and esrog on Shabbos. So I still remember like absent-mindedly doing that. So now I always have like anxiety every time I go out there. I'm like, okay, it's not Shabbos right now. It's not Shabbos. I'm reading my lulav Megillah, lulav and esrog shul. It's not Shabbos. Oh yeah. I still remember that. Okay. Now that's one rationale. That's the rationale you'll usually hear why we don't lane Megillah on Shabbos. There's another rationale that's not quoted as frequently, but definitely deserving of our attention. Rav Yosef Amar, Mipnei she'einehen shel aniyim nosos lemikra Megillah. Because the paupers, those who need to collect money, who need meals provided for them, they always look forward. When do they expect to get their meals? When they see that in shul they're laning Megillah, like, this is it. I'm getting a free meal today. So it would be very disappointing if we laned Megillah on Shabbos. But by the way, you're not allowed to give gifts out on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. We have a bas mitzvah coming up. So you know what's happening tomorrow? I'm meeting with David Hochman and his daughter Yakira, and I'm going to give them the gifts before Shabbos. She's going to make a kinyan on it. She's going to acquire her gifts before Shabbos so that when I give it to her at her bas mitzvah celebration in shul, she would have she already owns it. She's really the owner. We're just putting on pomp and circumstance. We're putting on a spectacle. We're good at that, right? So that's important. You're not allowed to give gifts on Shabbos. Let's say you're going out for a meal. What do? So you can put the wine on the table and say, I'm not transferring it to you, but anyone who wants to take the wine can take the wine. You can take wine. It's possible if something is litzorech Shabbos, it's for the necessity, it's for the purpose of owning Shabbos, you could give a gift. That's another exception. Undoubtedly, bringing wine to someone for a meal is certainly Litzorech Shabbos. Is giving a girl her bas mitzvah gift on Shabbos? That's a hard one, like, are they even allowed to open up the packages on Shabbos? That's another question. So many questions. Okay, so that's why we don't lane on Shabbos, because the poor aniyim, they're going to expect to get a free meal, and we're just not going to be able to do matanos levion. We're not going to be able to give money out. We're not allowed to give money on Shabbos. It's similar issue. We're not allowed to give money out on Shabbos, so we can't do matanos levionim on Shabbos. Therefore, we don't do mikra Megillah on Shabbos. Tanya Nami Halki, and there's a brisa that supports this very ruling or this opinion. Even though in general villages will move back to Thursday, on Thursday, since they're laning on Thursday, they also will collect matanos levionim, funds for the poor, and distribute it on Thursday as well. The Gemara asks, Afal pi shamru? That's a weird wording. Even though we're laying on Thursday, we give out food. It should say Adrabah mishum da amruhu. Because laning is on Thursday, we should be giving out matanos levionim. What's going on here? Ella, the Gemara elucidates. We give out on Thursday, since we're laning on Thursday, and the poor expect to get their matanos levionim on that day. But I would have thought that only the laning takes place on Thursday and no other mitzvos of Purim do. Why? Because, by the way, the meals do not take place on Thursday. The meals, even for the villages, will take place on Yud Dalid on the 14th proper. So I remember, I think Erwin, you're fond of bringing that up, that we're focusing so much on Mikra Megillah, but we're forgetting that there's other mitzvahs that we're supposed to do. There's Mishlach Manos, Matanos Levionim, gifts to the poor, and there's the Suda of Purim, the Sudas Purim we're supposed to have. So the Simcha-oriented mitzvah of having a meal will be on the 14th proper. So I could have thought to say that, so too Matanos Levionim, giving funds to the poor to help them have a Sudas Purim, should also be on the 14th. So we say, yeah, but because they're expecting it to get it on the day prior when we're laning Megillah, we wouldn't want to disappoint them. It's like I remember when I was in my gap year program, yeshiva. So they always have these Saturday night programs where they bring in some guy with a guitar and they do some music, and they're like, "Oh, we need to find entertainment for you guys. Let's do a kumsitz and sing." I'm like, "This is the best you guys can do for entertainment, for recreation." But they always said there'd be pizza served. So I come in and there's no pizza. I come an hour later back, after watching a movie with a friend and on Saturday night, and then there's still no pizza. And finally, like at 11 o'clock at night, they finally got the pizza over there, and I felt like these aniyim, who's like, when I hear this Mikra Megillah, I expect there to be matanos levionim, some food for me. So you're pushing it off only till 11 o'clock. You're pushing it off to the next day. Obviously, my scenario is not as dire as the aniyim described in the Gemara, but I can begin to feel the frustration that they could have felt, and the rabbis were very sensitive to this. Okay, I want to share one additional idea, and then I'll take questions, and then we'll conclude. So let me ask you a question. The first reason of Rabbah, we don't lay Megillah on Shabbos because we're afraid you'll carry it through Rosh Hashanah and violate Hotzah. That sounds like a great basis to knock out Kriyas Torah on Shabbos. Maybe we shouldn't be laning Torah on Shabbos. Wouldn't that make a lot of people happier? That's when things get the most monotonous. People get really bored. People start. That's when a lot of talking happens. It's difficult. It's difficult. It's difficult. So maybe we should knock out Kriyas Torah on Shabbos. And I'm not supporting that. I have ideas for how to streamline davening, and that's not on my list. But the question is, if we're not going to lay Megillah on Shabbos because you might carry it, shouldn't we be concerned that you might have to carry a Sefer Torah on Shabbos as well in order to learn the laning? And they didn't have tikkuns back then. You had to use an actual Torah. So why do we permit laning Torah on Shabbos, but not Mikra Megillah? We understand the question? I think fairly straightforward. Very good. One possible answer is given by the Nishal David. The Nishal David says, actually, in general, a Sefer Torah is not. This is something that in general, I should be more careful about. And it's a good question about Shiva Torahs as well. That a Sefer Torah is not supposed to be frivolously moved around. A Torah is supposed to stay in its proper place. And there are actual halachos in the Shulchan Aruch about when it's allowed to be moved, how many, and can it be moved just temporarily? There's real halachos about that. So unlike a Megillah that can be moved around portably, willy-nilly, a Sefer Torah is supposed to remain where it is. So presumably, because of those halachos, you're not going to start carrying it around from place to place. That's one suggestion that's given. Another suggestion that's given, and this is a really important one that speaks to the fundamental chiyuv, the nature of the chiyuv of Mikra Megillah versus Sefer Torah. The Gra in Meiser Rav, the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, is recorded of holding that one can read from other Megillos when the holidays coincide with Shabbos. So, I mean, that's what we'll do. Like on Shabbos Chol HaMoed, we'll be reading from the Megillah. So the question is, if I'm not allowed to read from Megillas Esther on Shabbos, why should I be allowed to read, the other Megillah, Shir Shirim that we do? Albeit these are not halachically mandated to the same degree as Megillas Esther, but they should follow the same model. Kal v'chomer, these ones that aren't as obligatory as Esther, we shouldn't be reading on Shabbos. And Kriyas Torah as well.
Does it have anything to do, Rabbi, with the fact that in the story of the Megillah, there is something that doesn't quite fit with the day of Shabbos, with the holiness of Shabbos, a destruction of people or whatever. It's just not in keeping with Shabbos. Possibly,
maybe that's a point we could develop further at some point. But the Gra says, let me ask you a question. If you have to leave during Megillah reading, and then you come back in a minute later, have you fulfilled your mitzvah of Mikra Megillah? The answer is no. You have to hear every word. And let's say you leave during Torah reading in shul, of course, in between aliyos, because it's usher to leave when the Torah is open. And then you come back, you leave during the second aliyah, you come back during the fifth aliyah. Have you fulfilled the mitzvah of Kriyas Torah on Shabbos? Well, actually, that's a funny way to phrase it, because this is actually the base for saying that the Torah reading we do on Shabbos is not a chovas hayachid. Unlike Mikra Megillah, which the obligation is incumbent upon the individual, I need to hear every single word in Megillah. Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos, Kriyas HaTorah in general, is a chovas hatzibor. It's a communal obligation. So the reason many people, I don't encourage them to show up late to shul because you're still missing Tefillah B'Tzibor and Shmona Esrei and many other, and Kadishim and many other important things. But the reason that you don't have to find a later Torah reading, and we're not having Torah readings throughout the day of Shabbos, is because it's a communal obligation. So long as there are 10 brave men that have showed up to shul and they heard the Torah reading, despite everyone else's excuse for not being there, the community has fulfilled their obligation of Torah reading. That shul, that minyan, has done it for the community. Wherever there are 10 men, they're obligated to read. Now we have an answer. For an individual chiyuv will be superseded by the concern of an individual sin of carrying on Shabbos. But the chovas hatzibor, the communal obligation, either due to its importance, because it's a communal need, which would supersede the concern for an individual sin, Or ki rabba midakri ada, the or, because it's communal, we're all looking out for each other, like Kriyas Torah, this concern would not apply. The concern might be a valid concern, but it wouldn't be an overriding concern to tell us not to lane on Shabbos. So that's why Mikra Megillah is not laned on Shabbos, because it's a individual obligation that's overridden by the concern for an individual carrying. But the communal obligation of Torah reading is not superseded by the concern of an individual happening to carry a Torah and violating something on an individual level. So that's all based on the Gra, and that's a very important idea just for thinking about the nature of the obligation of Torah. Obviously, I'm not going to tell people to go out to Kiddush Club during laning, but you guys are all upstanding, good individuals. I don't need to worry about that. If you show up to the Thursday night shiur, not to say if you don't show up to Thursday night shiur, you're not a good person, but if you do show up to Thursday night shiur, I'm pretty confident you're all good people and don't try to take advantage of these things. So that's why I can share this information with you confidently without any concern for anyone taking advantage. Okay, this is the end of the shiur. Wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you for learning together. And I'll stay on for a few minutes to address any remaining questions. And there might not be any remaining.
Thank you, Robert.
Judd, good to hear you.
Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbos, Phyllis.
Good Shabbos.
How would the
Shabbos,
CAS chauffeur fit into that paradigm in terms of individual community?
Thank you, Judd. So good. So Judd brings up how's Tia Shover fit in. So the answer would be similar to Megillah. Just like I might go to an expert to figure out how to pronounce a certain word in the Megillah. They didn't have a tikkun back then. I will go to an expert to teach me how to blow shofar, right? So I'll go to Howard
Weiss.
Howard Weiss. Yeah, I go to Howard. I always confuse Howard Wolf, Howard Weiss. I go to Howard Weiss, and he'll teach me how to blow the shofar, or another expert in our community. Anyone here a shofar blower? Okay, I'll go to another expert to teach me that. And same thing for lulav. I might go to someone to teach me how to do some pretty cool swings back and forth, do the non-nuam. So it's the same concern.
And those are both also individual chiyuvim, correct?
Shofar. Oh yeah. Very good, Toby. Very good point. And they are also individual chiyuvim. So that fits into the paradigm that the Gra gives us. Excellent point, Toby. And good point. Bring that up, Judd. Bobby, good to see you. You're just in time for the recap.
Thank you, Moshe.
All right. Good Shabbos, everyone. Take care.
Good Shabbos. Thank you,
Good job,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.